Earlier, my colleague Rochelle Kufo asked Klaus Larres for his take on Germany's election results. He is the Richard M. Crano Distinguished Professor of History and International Affairs at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Rochelle started off by asking him how difficult will it be to form a coalition government after a contentious win. Let's take a listen.
It will be very difficult, and both parties, both big parties, are dependent on both the Greens and the neoliberal business party FDP. So these two parties, which got 11 and 40% of the vote, they will actually make the government. They will make the new chancellor. Therefore, everyone is looking at them and whether they can reconcile their differences and whether or not they go into bed, so to speak, with the Christian Democrats or with the Social Democrats.
So then do we know yet what this change might mean in terms of the direction of the country, being that Angela Merkel's party was in power for 16 years?
Yes, that's very true. I think it is a new era. There will be a new approach in politics that is clear whenever a chancellor who has been in office for 16 years leaves, something new is going to happen. And the election campaign was dominated by climate change. And I think all parties will have to take that on board and will be much more climate conscious than they have been before. That is not to say that Angela Merkel ignored the issue, but I think even more attention will be focused on climate change.
And as you mentioned, the Green Party with a strong performance, they're getting the third highest percent in parliament. How influential do you think they'll be, though, when it comes to governing?
They will be very influential. They also have a very tough leadership. They have two leaders, a female and a male person. They're both tough and they know what they want. They, above all, know what their voters want. Their voters want more climate change. They want social justice. They probably want lower taxes. And sometimes they also want a harsher foreign policy course, at least in certain respects. So it will be very tough for any party to go into government with the Greens, because the Greens will not forget their voters. And they, of course, want to be re-elected in 4 years' time with an even bigger percentage points. So they have to take care of what their voters really want.
So in terms of the expectations as to how perhaps the SPD will govern when it comes to business and economic issues, what do we know so far?
Yeah, it's of course difficult to know, but the election campaign was dominated also not just by climate change, also by the modernization of German industry and the German business world. And that is long overdue. Again, Angela Merkel has achieved a lot during her period of time. The German economy was doing well, but many things also got pushed aside. Above all, digitalization. The German economy is really, in comparison to other economies, is really very little dependent on the digital world. The internet in Germany is often very slow, not fast enough. It is not really well represented all over the country. Something needs to be done about that, clearly. Also, bureaucracy needs to be diminished. Bureaucracy, like in many other countries in the world, is mushrooming, is getting totally out of control. So something will be needed to be done about that. Also, there are calls about the tax regime, whether or not taxes should be lowered, whether they should be increased, and things like that. What it all comes down is really about the role of the state and the government in the German economy. Should that role be increased, as the Greens would like to, or should it be decreased, as the liberal business party FDP, the Free Democrats, want?
And obviously, as the biggest economy in Europe, a lot of international partners probably watching the outcome of this.
Absolutely.
Is there a sense of whether Germany's trade relationship with China perhaps may change under this new leadership?
It could well do that, but at the moment also a lot of continuity is talked about. And both the big parties, Armin Laschet, the candidate of the CDU, and Olaf Scholz, the current finance minister and the chairman or the leader of the SPD, they really want to continue on the current trajectory with China and many other countries. They are very aware that China is a very important market for Germany. It is actually the largest trading partner for Germany. It has been for the last 5 years or so. They want to continue that relationship. The Greens and also the FDP have a tougher approach. They point to human rights. They point to climate change. They point to geopolitics much more so than Scholz and Laschet, and want to push these issues much harder. And if the Greens will form let's say if they take over the foreign ministry, for example, which could well be the case, then we can expect a much tougher line towards China, also regarding market access, human rights, and geopolitics, as I just said.
So what are you going to be keeping an eye on in the next few weeks now that this election has gone through?
First of all, who is going to form the government, clearly, and we really don't know yet. That process may go on for a few weeks. It could go on for a few months. Maybe Merkel will still be interim chancellor in December or January. We don't know. Everyone expects it to go into October, possibly into November. And then, of course, it's important who will occupy which ministerial post. Will the Greens really be in charge of the foreign ministry, which would really be important for Germany's future course in international politics? Who will be finance minister? Will the chief of the FDP, Christian Lindner, will he really be finance minister? And of course, all important, who will actually be the chancellor? Will it be Scholz or Laschet? And the chancellor has a very important role in German politics. He can put down the guidelines of German politics. And in the end, all the other parties in the coalition will have to agree with it, unless they want to provoke the breakup of the government, which of course, particularly at the beginning of a new government, is not very likely. So it remains interesting and exciting, and the next few weeks will certainly tell us a lot about the future of German politics.